Just a quick welcome to everyone to the Conversation Circle Series 4 on quality education here at the AI for SDGs initiative at the United Nations Association. I am glad that everyone was able to kind of make it without any difficulties or anything. We have an incredible panel of speakers here today with us, probably our largest panel so far for this initiative, and I cannot wait to get in and deep dive into the intersection of emerging technologies, AI, and its impact on the quality education space, making it accessible for those around us in with equity and equality in mind and the SDGs considered. We have speakers ranging from youth change makers as well as industry professionals in the education space who've already had an impact and established themselves in the sector, as well as, like I mentioned, youth who are getting started and are taking initiative and action from their end of things. We will go ahead and begin with our speaker introductions. We have Virgil Parker, Ben Ballman, and Shaun, Ben Ballman and Shaun from Tomorrow in Focus, Virgil Parker, our UNA USA Global Goals Ambassador, Zach Wallnock is the president of Nittany AI at Penn State University, Kabi, good to have you as well from UNESCO, and Dr. Bennet, Dean of School of Education at Franklin University. We can go ahead and feel free to introduce yourselves. I'll go and call on to the first person. Virgil, do you mind? The floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think you gave the gist of my introduction, but I have served as a Global Goals Ambassador for Sustainable Development Goal 4. Now, this is my third term. I have a very deep pride for education and promoting quality education both across America and across the globe. And I'm really excited about us having this conversation because with this growing idea around artificial intelligence, I really want to understand how this could benefit, harm, or what impact altogether it's going to have on education accessibility, right? As we promote quality, inclusive education across the globe. So I'm an advocate, I'm an ally to the idea of promoting inclusive education, and I'm really excited for us to have a very fruitful conversation. So thank you for having me to be present.
Thank you for being with us. Any takers, please feel free to introduce yourself. Would love to know a little more about your work.
I can popcorn it if you like.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure. Zach, you're to my immediate side. Zach Wallnock.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, I'm Zach Wallnock. I'm the current president of the Nittany AI Student Society. Education is probably the primary pillar of the Nittany AI Student Society. We're really engaged in breaking down barriers for education, teaching people about AI, making sure people aren't intimidating, but it's also a really big goal of mine personally. Education is something I'm really passionate about. I think education is the root of most problems nowadays. I think solving education would open up infinite barriers everywhere. So something I've been really involved in at my time at Penn State, and I hope I can be useful here for the discussion. I'm interested in hearing what happens. I'll popcorn it to Dean Bennet.
Zach, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this, what I consider a pivotal discussion when things are moving so quickly. While we'll discuss this over the time we have today, artificial intelligence will change faster than even our discussions will be able to cover. So if we're talking about being futurists, I'm very excited about this discussion. And in part because one of my other roles at Franklin University is leading our International Institute for Innovative Instruction. And that allows me to work outside of just our curriculum and work with other Fortune 100 companies and universities across the globe. So thank you so much, and I look forward to our dialogue.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here, Dr. Bennett. Do you want to popcorn it over to someone?
I do. And I want to make sure, is anybody who has their camera on? I don't have a list of the speakers today.
Oh, we have Kabi, Shaun, and Ben.
Our left, Ben, and in the spirit of Ben Franklin.
Yeah, fortunately, I'm Benedict and not a Benjamin. Yeah, really excited to be here. I'm a undergraduate senior at Vanderbilt University and a co-founder of Tomorrow in Focus. We're a 501c3 nonprofit AI production house. It's kind of a mouthful. But really what we do is leverage AI video generation to make storytelling materials, video, media, and the like accessible to NGOs, nonprofits, and other mission-focused organizations. Really excited about a project that we recently finished up with the G20 Global Land Initiative, really showcasing youth experience with global land degradation. Just kind of thinking about the general space of how do we use these technologies for good, as well as how do we create materials that can educate people and the like. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Shaun as well, who's also here alongside me.
Hi everyone, my name is Shaun Karakkattu. I'm on the board for Tomorrow in Focus. I served as the UNCCD North America Youth Focal Point, and that's kind of where a lot of my experience started. And this nonprofit that we just created was really started back through an education project, working with K through 12 kids on teaching them about climate change. And what else? I am also an undergrad at Vanderbilt, and we're both really excited to graduate in a couple months. So yeah, and then I think there's only one person left, so popcorn to that person. Yeah.
Kabi, all you.
Hello everyone, namaste. I'm Kabi Paudel from Nepal, and I am passionate about advocate quality education, especially SDG4 and my working experience. I'm totally working as a Majiline community in grassroots level as a rural part of Nepal, and I am member of SDG4 Youth and Student Network, and I am also ambassador of My Body is My Body program. So this program is totally like teaching about our body safety. So I'm also advocate our body safety. In past 5 years, I'm working Peace People Foundation as a program manager. So now I'm doing my master, and I'm enjoy work with the children, youth, which inspire to work positive change in my community. And I believe education is the key of to peace, equality, and happiness for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's been an incredible sort of discussion starter with the introductions that we have going on. Kabi, I would love to dive deeper a little bit into the specific work you do, and specifically, what do you do at the Youth Student Network at UNESCO, and how does your work translate to your sort of contributions in Nepal and someone in the global South? I'd love to know your perspective. It's got to be very interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much for question. Yeah, so as a member of SDG4 Youth and Student Network, I am representative as a Nepal also, and also Asia Pacific region. So advocating for the unique education challenges faced by these areas, especially education sector. So my work focusing on advancing inclusive, quality, and sustainable education, which are particular emphasize of the region specific need. So I am to raise awareness about the educational status in Nepal and the border Asia Pacific region, also highlighting to barriers to quality education and seeking solution to overcome them. And also I'm dedicated to creating safe and health learning environment, also promoting education for sustainable development, EST, and advocating for climate education as well. So throughout the global policy dialogue and also initiative like stop bullying, so I'm ensuring education is not only accessible but also empowering for all learners. So my roles goes beyond the networking. I'm actively engaged with the policymaker, also train teachers, and also collaborate with parents to bring meaningful change in the education system. So in the addition, I also engage in the some social media campaign to raise awareness on education issues, reaching a broader audience in encouragement action to global scale. And also through this platform, I share educational resources and opportunity with my network, like social media like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. So I'm sharing all opportunity with my network. So creating a space for discussion and collective problem solving, this kind of things. And also, I contribute to shaping global education policies, also ensuring that the voice of youth from my region, especially my region in Nepal, and also included the discussion, making sure the change we want to see in the education reflections the diverse need for all students and our community and our grassroots level. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually incredible that you bring in the idea of climate change into the education space as well as the other SDGs. It's the beauty of it, isn't it? The SDGs, how interdisciplinary they are. And kind of speaking of and tying into the idea of climate, I would love to um, go over to Shaun and Ben. I remember one of our calls previously kind of incorporated the idea of climate change and how you guys tackle that as well, and a multitude of other SDGs through the education sphere. So I'd love to know more about Tomorrow in Focus, what it is, and a little more about both of your work. Yeah, Ben or Shaun.
Yeah,
I can,
definitely. Oh
you
no,
want to
Shaun, you got it, man.
Okay, I can start. Essentially, like our idea for our essentially we worked on a short film called Imagine, and the idea there was to think about what children thought of their future, and that kind of big goal, which I think Benedict can talk a little bit more about the film and the film process, kind of incorporating students' visions there. But really started off with COP28. So I had the chance to go with my university to present an education students project. So the idea was interviewing kids from as small as 3 to as big as 17 and creating different kind of educational materials to teach them about climate change. And we worked with community partners in Nashville to bring together different materials and resources to make these different versions of like, it's called Southwest e-leather. So they worked on this e-leather to create what their future would look like 40 years from now. And it was cool to kind of see what people of different ages thought. Like we had a 6-year-old be like, I want to be a firefighter. And I was like, okay, like what would like a firefighting truck look like 20 years from now, 30 years from now? And like they would go in and draw these different things. So just like starting that conversation with students is really what we thought was a great way to kind of take what they already knew and incorporate it into what they just learned about climate change or what they see in their own communities, and then that kind of manifested in to the film that we created, which Ben can talk about.
Yeah. So I think a lot of our focus in this space is trying to make materials and media and storytelling and using that as a point of leverage to create change. And so this film project that we worked on, Imagine, is really showcasing, we have a instance in Nashville or outside Nashville with forest fires, and then we have oil spills in Brazil, and then we focus on Senegal, and then we focus on the northern plateaus in China, and really have this kind of intercontinental kind of expose on different instances of land degradation. And the G20 Global Land Initiative really wanted this to bring to different summits and presences across the world and kind of increase awareness in that way. And so I think that's a really big vehicle for creating change, is having people be aware about how these different global crises are impacting people across the world, and particularly in different settings. And so that's kind of one way to think about it. Tomorrow in Focus as well does AI video generation. And that in a lot of ways can be really carbon intensive. And so one of the reasons why we're a 501c3 and not just a for-profit organization as well, trying to just make as much money as we can with this technology, is we're trying to find the best way to do it possible. And we're trying to be stewards with this technology to ensure that it's being incorporated as best that we can. And so a lot of the technology that we're creating and the workflows that we use a lot of carbon mitigating and energy mitigating practices to really bring down the toll on that end as well. And so following each project, and you can see this on our website for Imagine as well, we release carbon reports that kind of document how carbon intensive these projects really are. Kind of really show as well that we're getting better at it and making it make a lot more sense in the kind of SDG realm as well. And so there's a lot of kind of different ways to think about what we're doing.
Lovely to hear that. And again, kind of tying in the different SDGs that play into the education sphere and talking about innovative ways to educate, something that Dr. Bennett mentioned a few minutes ago, that he does from a part of his own initiatives and his work at at Franklin University. Dr. Bennett, the floor is yours. I would love to know a little more about the innovation in education that you're bringing about.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to hear about the other great projects that people are working on. The possibilities with generative AI, because it's a creative, are unique in our lifetimes and actually in the history of the world. This idea of, well, where we're working right now, if I talk about the intersection, education is typically working with a subject matter expert. For me, it's working with a set of instructional designers in our institute and our faculty to create curriculum. And then alongside that is thinking about the information architecture and how we're going to work with students and depending on their context. And that's global, right? We have social milieus that we deal with depending on which country we're educating in. But let's just take the United States. And then we also have age. We have all different biodemographics that play into that. But I think many of you have started to see that generative AI is being plugged in and integrated into almost every tool of technology that we leverage in lots of different unique ways, some good, some bad. But I was listening to at the State House in Ohio a couple of weeks ago, a principal, Ms. Wanner from Deloitte. She's working with Fortune 50 companies, and $680 billion is estimated of what's been spent on generative AI thus far. Just think about that number to train these large language models. And one of the things that's coming out of their future look at this is that agentic AI is really going to be the clear future that expands for corporations. Well, but I think for education, agentic AI gives us an opportunity for real personalization. For those that are in school now or have been in school, I'm much older than many of you likely. And when I was in school, personalization was not something that was addressed. It was very rote. Here's the test. Here's what you have to learn. And this is the lecture. And here's the midterm and the final. And we've come a long way in our principles of understanding how people learn. K-12 most specifically, and we're doing, I think, much better in higher education. We have so far to go. But if you could think about this large language model being an umbrella over top of our curriculum and as an assistant to our faculty, professors, and to our students working together, there's a great opportunity. And we're working on that now across our curriculum and thinking about how we personalize this, because there's a lot of information about the student's work that doesn't get passed from professor to professor, from class to class. But AI can know that and can mine that and can remind me, Patrick, this paper is actually going to be 5 or 6 pages. And remember, APA citation was a challenge in your last class and some feedback that you got, and that carries on across this. I can give you 1,000 examples of this. If you talk about equity, this is equity in education, because something that comes alongside you and helps every single student in a different way, because there's a lot of personalization that is lost as we travel through the conventional thought of what classes are today, right? This kind of stop and start that's based on time versus mastery and competency, whole lots of things to talk about there. And then think about being able to take that out into the context of transnational education. Now, there's a lot to be done there, from how we build these models based on the information, based on the ethical components of that for each culture, right? If we think about Hofstede's dynamics, there's a ton to incorporate there. But I'm bullish about this, and that the opportunity for these, as I said, just in the number of minutes or hours that we'll be together today, the number of transactions that will take place on a single chat GPT or something else, it will read more than you will likely read in your entire lifetime. That's what will happen in just that small amount of time. And that curve continues exponentially to move up. So to summarize that for you, there are ethical considerations around what it takes and the work that a student should do or a learner should do. I don't want to call you a learner, lifetime learner. And the work of that assignment that is your creation yourself, the importance of that because of the skills that you gain during that, the critical thinking, the knowledge attainment, the good struggle, what we call in education, the thinking process. And currently, and many of you have probably seen this or you're leveraging it, Gen AI will create things for you. That's what it does. It's a creative. And the ability to incorporate that into assignments. And so we're thinking of it in three different ways. Those that should have no Gen AI in them, and then those assignments that should be paralleled with it, and those that should be completely that. If you think about workforce development programs, if you're in a business program, depending on the type of course that you're in, that's likely the skills that you're going to be using in the professional world. We want to teach you those. So there are a number of faculty that I think are adjusting to this new world. That's a lot of words to say. There are those that say, no, you shouldn't be using it all. And we've had this adoption problem throughout technology and education technology. You've likely experienced this in your careers from adoption or in education. So I thank you for the opportunity. I want to hear from others.
No, absolutely. There's actually an incredible amount of kind of the various points that you bring up, especially coming from a software development sort of very technical focused background in my academic field. Yeah, say the least, very, very interested and looking forward to exploring more on agentic AI and how its impact in education could be brought about. And that's something I actually haven't paid attention to, and I'm sure I'm not the only one and interested to know more about it. We have kind of like you mentioned, lifelong learners in audience who are actively exploring this space and researching and diving deeper in. And so I would love to hear their thoughts as well once we open up the floor to an open dialogue setting. But Dr. Bennett, thank you so much. That was very, very informative, and if anything, to bring about points that a lot of us haven't necessarily thought about before. To segue into the more technical side of things, Zach, I would love to hand the floor over to you. The mic's yours. I'd love to know more about your work in Nittany AI. If you have any thoughts on the agentic AI side of things with education, I'd actually love to pick your brain in it. Yeah, the floor is yours, Zach.
Absolutely. Dr. Bennett, what you touched on with agentic AI and scaling, I couldn't connect more personally with. It's been a huge part of Nittany AI. There's a couple components of Nittany AI that we really wanted to focus on in regards to education, and one of them is the ethical side of using LLMs to do work and resource connections. So one of the ways that Nittany AI has found through the machine learning bootcamp to use AI to, I would say, encourage people to do the work themselves and not use LLMs, but still use the conveniency of an LLM is to just use it as a bridge between resources that already exist. So there was a project a while ago that came through Nittany AI that used a technique called RAG. It's a little technical. I won't get into the details here, but it's basically just a connector between resources and LLMs. So one of the really big solutions that came out of that was when a teacher could just upload a bunch of resources themselves, and this RAG agent would just connect to resources that teachers had. So it still promotes the students learning on their own while not just like, giving them the answer. So that was a huge success, and something we found has been really useful is instead of just letting LLM provide the solution, has just been slowly guiding them towards the right path. The other thing that you said, Dr. Bennett, that I really liked was how you scale with generative AI. The biggest problem we had at Nittany AI, and we discovered this so quickly, and we still haven't found a solution, is how you scale a classroom when it gets beyond, like, say, 15 students. When we started the machine learning bootcamp, it was, oh my gosh, it was probably like 5 students. So whenever someone had a question, I could just stop everything and I could personally answer that question for them. But as the program grew, I think now we're at like 140 members. When somebody has a question, we don't have enough we have a whole team around the machine learning bootcamp. We still don't have enough time to answer everything individually. So having a repository full of like 1,000 resources has been great for students, but I mean, nobody's going to read it all. So having an LLM personally adapt each answer to each question has been amazing. The other big problem we have is that no student learns at the same rate. Now, in the context of a classroom, you have to get through a certain bit of material, and it makes sense. You want to guide students at the pace of the class. But in a club structure, when we kind of just want to promote like motivation, we want to get people motivated about a specific subject, the pace you teach people at really matters. So having LLMs inform us about where people are at, what pace we should be going, how engaged people are, is a really exciting aspect of AI. And I think that will be a very pivotal solution going forward, is how we use AI to facilitate large classrooms and how we facilitate different learning speeds. But I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you for adding on to the insights that we've kind of gathered throughout the sort of 30 minutes of us kind of being here. I wish we could go longer than just an hour now that the conversation kind of grew into something a lot cooler than I thought it would be, if I'm being very, very honest. But Virgil, I'll give the floor to you, and I would love to know kind of your thoughts and insights on the discussion so far from our speakers from a policy lens as a global goals ambassador for multiple years in a row with the United Nations Foundation, and being at the forefront of global policy with education and being in the field at the same time. I'd love to know kind of your insights from what you've gathered at the discussion here so far, and a little bit into your work as well.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me, and thanks for gathering this conversation. Really happy to hear from this panel of folks. As I told you privately, and then I'll even say it publicly, I'm not an expert on artificial intelligence at all, and I'm very appreciative that Dr. Bennet. So happy to have a professor here. That Dr. Bennet said that even in this conversation we're having within an hour, AI is going to be evolving to rates that we probably don't even understand. In our capacity. I think AI is one of those spaces that is going to continue, as we're saying, to evolve. And from a policy perspective, I think it is our responsibility as the people, talking to our legislators, as diplomats going to places like the United Nations, the European Union, and other spaces where you have countries come together and talk about global issues. It's important to talk about how AI can cause inequality or how it can support more equity, right? And to ensure that with AI, to Zach's point, if it can, serve more students at a higher capacity, if it can, provide more convenience when it comes to delivering information and helping professors become more effective and teachers become more effective in the classroom, that's all very, very important. And as we are building out these policies, the way to be successful especially in the lens of SDG4, but the way to be successful is to continue to talk to the stakeholders, those like Dr. Bennet who are in the classroom teaching, those like the college students like Zach and yourself, Rakib, and others who were in the classroom and who are actively using AI to help with the research, right? For example, in those who interface with AI on a regular basis, even here in Zoom, those who use Zoom, you can now use AI as an AI companion to help you take notes, right? If you do a simple Google search on your phone, now that Google now has this feature called AI Assistant, where if you're a scholar, it provides you with, if you search a word or search a topic, it gives you a whole repository of information like that, right? It's almost like replaced Google Scholar from back in the day, but it makes researching, brings about a convenience. What that brings into the conversation is assure that we have equality and access to technology, right? Because don't forget, we still have those under-resourced, underfunded education systems and school systems that lack infrastructure, not just within America in some spaces, but across the world. So from a policy perspective, we want to make sure within our own countries here in America that Congress ensures that with the introduction of AI, students across the space remain competitive, and that AI doesn't give give an advantage to some and leaves other in a disadvantage because of the lack of technology. But from a global perspective, we have to ensure that it's happening across the world, right? For those of the conversation, I'm glad everyone's here today. For those who are part of this conversation, we recognize that with the 17 SDGs that started in 2015, one of the top priorities of the SDGs as a collective is that we need all the SDGs in order to succeed, in order to accomplish the 2030 agenda. And part of that is recognizing that there are certain loopholes that we're going to have to navigate. And with the introduction of technology like AI, we have to use that to our advantage, and also ensure that people aren't being left behind because of their limited access to technology. So as you've asked, what I do in my role as a Global Goals Ambassador, I convene certain speakers on topics similar to artificial intelligence and access to education at primary, secondary, in high school level, college level, et cetera, just to make sure that across the spectrum, we are moving in the direction that we want to of getting people to make sure they're in classroom, in the quality education space, but even when they're existing in the classroom, to ensure that they have the tools necessary to be effective once upon graduation and entering into their respective workforce. And I care about that whole process, as we all should care about the whole process here in America, but also across the world, because we are a global society. So I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued about the pros and cons of artificial intelligence. I'm not an expert on the topic as a whole, but I know that with one of the cons, teachers have talked about how some students may tap into AI to have them, write papers for them or do certain assignments, or it can be a issue around misinformation and disinformation. So it causes you to be very, very intentional about fact checking the information that you are exposed to now that you have another layer of access to information. So there's a lot that we have to just consider as we are navigating through this area, since AI has ballooned so significantly over these last couple of years. And I think it's going to take us working together to address any of the known and unknown, unforeseen dilemmas on this topic.
Thank you so much, Virgil. I love your idea of bringing in the concept of disparity in education as a result of these technological innovations. And I've always been a very big advocate of the fact that the rate at which innovation moves forward today in the global north, or the Western world as we call it, is the same rate at which a lot of the global south falls behind. And it is up to us who are at the forefront of these innovations and are leading this data-driven world and into the very much technology-driven future that we are clearly going towards. It is up to us who are at the forefront to make it equitable and make technologies like this, and including education, accessible for those in the global south. I would actually love to know Kabi's kind of outlook into it, coming from someone who is actively there and working with UNESCO in the global south and taking part in the United Nations education sort of sphere in the workforce. As youth, I'd love to know more about your outlook on it, as well as Shaun and Ben, your project, and how your international experience has been around the world presenting your film, as well as how AI has an impact to make this education more accessible to those who aren't necessarily getting it in the most traditional way possible. So innovative ways to make this education more accessible, such as through filmmaking and AI generated productions, could be potential solutions to these global challenges that we face today. Before we move forward with the discussion, I'd love to open up the floor to the rest of the audience, and hoping for some questions on the topics that I just kind of mentioned to Kabi, Shaun, Ben, as well as the rest of our panelists here. And I'm sure I'm getting a few messages on the chats about some questions for Dr. Bennet already. Happy to open up the floor at this time. We are almost at the half-hour mark of this conversation, and the audience here, please feel free to raise your hand, unmute. We're in very much of an open dialogue setting now. Feel free to ask your questions, comments, express your insights that you've gotten so far from this discussion. Our panelists would be more than happy to chime in, answer your questions, as well as build on the discussion that we've had so far. I see Cassie. Catherine, you have your hand raised. The floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Bennett and Virgil. I don't know that I more so have a question or a comment, or we'll just see kind of where this ends up. But I think it was interesting hearing from both of you in contrasting ways, especially being on the student side of this and kind of seeing where education is, but also juggling, how am I using AI ethically as a student, but also in a school setting where our teachers are not informed and equipped in a way to understand that AI is a tool, and working on, teaching our educators that in our school systems that it is a philosophy versus a policy. You're not creating a policy to reprimand, you're creating a philosophy for something that is ever evolving and working. And I guess I'm curious, Dr. Bennett, how are you, I guess, how at a higher level institution, what is the kind of balance of understanding like where the ethic line is drawn or the ethical line is drawn? And I think that, Virgil, you kind of mentioned that in terms of the global scale and the connotation in the EU of AI versus our connotation of AI, and just in a classroom setting, how it's being used, taught, talked about, and even not talked about.
Catherine, it's a core question for adoption. And because it's moving so quickly, I can tell you, I've been at Franklin for almost 25 years. We started experimenting with online education in 1997. We were actually 1996. We were one of the first. We did the pilot with the federal government for financial aid to be able to provide financial aid to a program, not just a set of online courses. But I can tell you in that time, from building LMSs, which we built our own, and moving to commercial products today, the speed at which, we were teaching professors and other faculty in 2001 and 2000 how to use email, and we had years to actually do that. And now you have minutes to be able to bring people on board. Let me make this concise and succinct. It's moving fast for everyone, and learners, students, most specifically in K-12 and in higher education, are aware of these tools and how to use them much faster than I think faculty are. I'm pushing for policy at our institution and at others that says we should be adopting this, and you have to create assignments that have rules within them, and we have to set those boundaries. And I gave you those 3 levels, and there could be others as well, right? But this is a no AI assignment. And here's the reason why, and explaining that. This is one that leverages it, and this is one that should build all of it out of that, and then should have assessment at the end of it is what's the quality of it. One of the things we haven't talked about, I don't think specifically, is there are a whole set of biases that are in AI that we have to be careful of. One of them is the training bias, understanding that there's probably only 6 companies in the world that are probably have enough money and qualification to really train the big LLM that we're leveraging. I think for K-12, this is an adoption process too, but I think K-12 teachers are adopting, in my experience, in our School of Education, are adopting much faster because they don't have the resources that they typically need. And so an ability to put a plan together. My wife is a 4th grade teacher, and I can tell you that she has her students leveraging generative AI to help them work with certain things. And so they're already incorporating those assignments. Now imagine that, I won't take much longer, sorry. But now imagine I'm in higher ed. I'm not going to see those kids for another 10, 15 years. And they already know how to leverage AI, and they know how to leverage it well. And so if you are a professor at a traditional institution and you've got incoming freshmen, I just say, wake up. You should be working to adopt this. Your students know how to leverage it, and it is a tool that's being leveraged within the corporate world in a way that you have to understand and integrate into your assignments.
Thank you for that response, Jonathan. I'll also respond briefly. What I'm about to say is going to sound a little sinister, but this is how I've heard this whole AI situation This is from a friend who was just using it. This is how I've heard this whole AI situation be described from a podcast he'd heard, that some people are using the term adapt or die. And I don't think that's a very fair term to use, but it's almost like where we are right now when you take the different technological booms we've had. Dr. Bennett talked about the email. We can also talk about the dot-com boom. This is a situation now where the scholars who are of our age in this moment, and even 3, 4, 5 years from now, in a shorter time span, they're going to be learning differently. They're going to be learning very differently. So to address your question, both from a government perspective and then also from an administrative perspective within certain schools, I do think the government perspective, if any country, they allow AI to be present in their society. I think the government plays a role in ensuring that there's equal access to the technology infrastructure, and ensuring that their schools have the infrastructure. And there's going to have to be ways to explore that from a policy and a funding standpoint, because what you don't want to happen is that there are certain students, again, that are just above the curve or above the line, above any standard, because their school just so happens to have a better infrastructure in order to leverage AI and give it to the students. And then secondly, from an administrative standpoint, if your school has the resources and has the ability and allow their students and the teachers to use AI, I do think that there has to be an ethical standard and what you do and do not allow in the classroom. I have a friend who's a teacher, and he says all the time he has students who he's an English teacher who will use his AI to write their papers, and there's guidelines how you should be able to use it, because what we don't want are scholars who don't have the skill sets to be able to read a book, analyze a book, and write about it without having to use the super convenience of technology, right? So I mean, we live in a hyper technology society, right? So technology is going to be present nonetheless, but you want to still maintain the level of effectiveness of critical minds who can think and to read in the situations where technology are not going to be ever present, like AI allows us. And you want to make sure that people aren't trying to cut corners and be deceitful with their scholastic practices. So to Dr. Bennett's point and to your point, it's navigating the legality of it, and if you allow it to happen legally, it's the ethical part of how do we maintain a level of integrity in any type of scholastic involvement in schools. I think that's really important, especially in terms of SDG 4.
Very cool. It's you bring up a very cool point, Virgil, about the disparity that we were just talking about a few minutes ago, between the Western world and then the global South and whatnot. However, their disparity can also stem in an intergenerational setting that Dr. Bennett, that you bring in the idea of some students not being prepared enough and well versed in AI and this booming field that we have coming over us, and it's only fair that they get a fair shot at it as well. And the policy side of things, and those at the forefront of global policy shaping education and how things are taught and how things are learned, it is up to them to kind of bring it in an equitable manner to all students, and then some pick it up faster, some pick it up a little slower than the others, in different ways, is up to the individual itself, of course. But having the opportunity to access these resources is incredibly important to drive SDG 4 quality education, and making it accessible for all. I'm waiting for any other questions that anyone else may have. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had a question. So I know that AI has like massive potential to offer educational assistance and like personalized tutoring to people who may usually not be able to afford such luxuries. But like I think that for this to be useful and not widen the gap between people who have access to such things and people who don't, like I think what first has to be focused on is the problem of digital exclusion in this world. And I just want to ask, since there are, I think, upwards of 2.6 billion people who don't even have access to internet at this time in the world, do you think is it like advisable? Is it smart to keep moving on with such progress while like almost one third of the world is still quite far behind and won't have, and will that create bigger inequalities?
Kabi, I would love to know your thoughts on this kind of specific idea of like we even mentioned when we were still within the panel was the idea of the global or one part of the world kind of innovating at a pace at which the other part of the world falls behind. And I feel like Darren, your question is definitely something similar along the lines. And Kabi coming from Nepal and being with UNESCO and the education sector at the United Nations. What are your thoughts? Yeah, what do you see in on field as you work?
Yeah, in the basic of Nepal, also some of the problem in AI to using, because here also, especially I'm working as a government school, so they don't know how to use AI. So this is a very like important things. They even though they have not access to like technology, they have to not access to laptop, mobile phone, any gadget, because there are no electricity, no internet. Sometimes no internet, only electricity, no internet. So this is problem all wide, I know. And also thousands Nepali sectors, even though nowadays I'm see the global level, but in our context, in our Nepali context, is only they use in like cities area and like private school, and one of the government school who survive is a good circle and good infrastructure. So my things, we need to more like awareness, more like more accessible education to everywhere. Like not only gadgets, we need to teaching teachers how to use AI. And also they have not access to tools, but they have to idea, they have to create any idea, and they have to generate like practical way. So we need to move, we need to do access to all over the global sites. So yeah.
Yeah, very interesting reminder, if anything, that a lot of the world, while we worry about how fast our internet is, some worry about if there is internet at all. And I think this disparity in the infrastructure gap stems from a a biased sort of investment structure that we have in this world today. Whatever continues to make money gets funds flowing into it. And whatever doesn't but promises to kind of gets left behind or gets increasingly difficult for them to uh to get that funding or have that infrastructure built and have access to resources that different parts of the world kind of has. Brooke, you had a question. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate this. I really appreciate all this, like, conversation that we're having here. I actually wanted to bring up the institution in school of tomorrow and ask. Um, so I do believe that you guys work on creating AI, like videos and other forms of, education mediums for, students around the world. I was wondering if you saw in any different, if you saw any variation in terms of where one form of education was much more popular in certain areas than others. And if you saw like there was a certain trend in maybe even economic, areas, and I don't know, like just kind of like what things that you guys might perceive as being very successful overall in some regions of the world, and what other experiments you guys have in terms of providing this education in other forms. But yeah, I'd love to get your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, that was a great question. So we're a pretty kind of new organization. And so unfortunately, a lot of what we've been working on is too recent to have kind of that longer term awareness that you're asking about. And so it's hard to see that kind of longer term effect and just measure the outcome. But it is a really good question in the sense of a lot of the difficulty and inaccessibility in media kind of doesn't allow for what you're talking about, where it's a cultural resonance and kind of a local resonance of this media for individuals in any kind of, be that New York City, the metropolitan space, or some of the most remote regions of the world. And so that's kind of like a huge value point that we're seeing and that we're trying to incorporate in a lot of the projects that we're working on is, say, the score that we used in Imagine. We had kind of localized instruments incorporated for the Brazil section and the Senegal section and the Northern Plateaus and Chinese section. And so incorporating those little elements as well as and thinking about how we're telling the stories of how land degradation is experienced in these places and doing so through a culturally relevant sense as well, I think is really important. So as we're then looking at future projects like with the TerraCycle Foundation that does a lot of, say, plastic cleanup in rivers in Thailand, we're actually connecting with local artists to kind of see what animation style we want to use and then kind of take their work and incorporate that into our models. And so the actual even visual style is culturally grounded. And then talking with individuals who are working on those projects to kind of understand how they're working on the ground. And so we have kind of that really good grounding of it. Or say, yeah, I think that's a pretty good example. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that longer term impact of it. But I think it's something we're thinking about and that we see the value of in this project.
I'm glad that you bring up the idea of cultural context in education, because I think it definitely plays a great role, especially when we're talking about outside of just ourselves or the United States or wherever our sort of regional or geographical area might be. It's not the same everywhere, and people coming from different backgrounds and different walks of life is what makes our human society that we live in this unique, and our individual uniqueness is what adds to our significance, and taking it into consideration is only fair to make education more accessible. I'd love to add a little bit actually on a part of my org back 5 years ago. My friends and I, we founded Climate Cardinals. For a lot of us who kind of know about Climate Cardinals, all we do is make climate education accessible for non-English speakers. And I think this ties in very well with especially what Ben brought in, the idea of cultural context, as well as the idea of education being more accessible. But for the right people in their own ways. Specifically, AI and the way we leverage AI at Climate Cardinals is through translation models. And we've realized most climate information being published in English around the world, including research and documentation, there is a stark linguistic disparity that we fail to notice, which is most people facing the worst of the climate crisis actually come from the global south and are non-English speakers. So at Climate Cardinals, all we do is make climate education accessible for those that do not speak English and have it translated in vernacular. Something that we've noticed while doing this for a number of years now is that no one in the global south, very few actually in the global south, who are worried about their 3 meals a day and worried about their earnings and their livelihood, don't really have the time to read through pages of climate research and climate jargon at the end of the day, at the end of often an 18-16 hour day of work. And so we realized the importance of cultural context in this, in the climate education sphere particularly. So we began condensing climate resources, climate research and climate science down to culturally relevant, contextually relevant, sort of short stories that someone coming out of a 12 to 18, 16-hour workday can come back home, has the time to scroll through a little passage in their own language, but something that relates to their own daily lives. So I think Ben, the idea that you bring up about cultural context in education also plays into the climate space. I think we were talking about it. We briefly touched on it, and I kind of wanted to bring it up. I think ties in really well with the specific kind of conversation and the different dynamics, the sheer amount of dynamics we've added to the education sphere, including agentic AI, to cultural context, global disparities between the South and the North, as well as different personalized learning methods that a lot of people can kind of take advantage of. We've also touched on the negative impacts of AI, the potential negative impacts of AI. And Virgil, thank you so much for bringing in your sort of global and policy lens into our conversation today, kind of adding to how these disparities can be tackled from a policy standpoint, and those at the forefront of global policy, kind of spearheading the education accessibility sector, making it equitable for the rest of us outside of the United States, within the United States, in different parts of the country where things aren't accessible as we think it is. So yeah, with that said, I wanted to kind of summarize a lot of what we've spoken about today. And as we near the end of our conversation circle, we only have a couple more minutes. I will ask for any last questions from the audience or insights that we've gathered, and we would like to voice it and share. I see a few chats flying in the chat here in Zoom. Yeah, if you'd like to unmute and speak on it, I'd love to dedicate the last minute or two to the last few questions that our audience has.
Yeah, I'll also add on a little bit to Brooke's earlier question as well. I think part of it is also, I think a lot of people have talked about this, kind of giving the tools to the people who need to tell stories and need to be the educators and kind of get that out. We're actually starting a workshop series in a little bit with the G20 Global Land Initiative to take 100 leaders in the Global South and kind of giving them these AI storytelling tools so that we take individuals who have stories and have education that they need to kind of get out there that certainly don't have the resources. Because you think about the media and the videos that are out there, it's incredibly disproportionately for NGOs, nonprofits, and the like in the North in the Global North or in the West, whatever that might mean. And so we're really trying to kind of give those tools to the individuals who, in any case, wouldn't have the funding or the access to then tell their own stories. And so kind of really grounding that in their own cultural context and experience, which I'm really excited for to see how that goes. So certainly send updates to the group.
Thank you so much, Ben. We'd love to know more about the workshop initiative that's coming up with storytelling, and yeah, that definitely has immense potential in the accessibility side of things here in the global education sphere. With that said, we are hitting 8 o'clock in the Eastern time zone, and we're officially over with the conversation circle. Just wanted to extend my utmost gratitude to our panel today. This was one of the most interesting conversations I've had in a while, with so many, a multitude of different dimensions added to the global education sphere. And without our panelists here, would not have been possible. So thank you so much for being here today. I will follow up with all of us later once the session's over. But with that said, I conclude our session here.